I've just returned home from an absolutely incredible lock and load experience. Ton of fun. And today I'd like to talk to you about the keynote address. SFG went over a lot of important details and changes that are coming up to the game. My name's Ryan, and I used to be good at Warmachine. Welcome to what? What? What do you mean they got rid of spell rack? Okay, just never mind. I'd say that the biggest reveal that we had during the keynote was the fact that they are going to eliminate the spell rack from the game and will return to what was a more traditional Mark II, Mark III style where warcasters have static spell lists that are longer. You'll have 6, 7 spells long instead of 3 base and 2 or 3 on the rack. It's a significant change for the game, and one that I am still processing. Right now, Warmachine is a game where you could largely one-list events. I think that the flexibility of the spell rack has sort of limited the need for 2 lists in a game pairing process. It's still helpful to have 2 lists, obviously, but so many lists have been homogenized because every list has the answer to everything because of the spell racks. I do think that it does limit faction design space because of some of the spells that are on the spell rack. Take Dusk, for example. We have Battle Lust. Having Battle Lust on the rack means that every army ever I take has access to Battle Lust. If that goes off the rack and onto somebody's spell list, now I have one caster that deals with armor extra well with the Battle Lust effect. And obviously that's going to come across to a lot of different armies and really change the way the game feels. Again, it's going to go back to what we were more used to Mark II, Mark III, which was a fantastic game. I'm only expecting the removal of the spell rack to be better for the game. As for what I do with a YouTube channel named Spell Rack, I guess we'll see. I'll probably keep the name, but maybe I'll take considerations if anybody has anything. With lists not having inbuilt answers, it means that your list pairs are going to need to be more focused on what they're actually answering. If you have a caster who on their spell list has some anti-range spells, or if you have a caster who on their spell list has some mat fixing, now you're not picking from the rack when you play a game, you're picking from your lists when you play a game. It does mean that I think skews are going to come back more than we have seen currently. Obviously, there are defensive feats that give +3 armor, +3 defense, but you don't see skew lists like we used to. And I feel like a lot of that is going to come back. You'll have one list that is an armor skew with a lot of boxes, and not every list now is going to have an answer to armor. So when you look at your opponent's pairing, if you see list A that deals with armor and list B that doesn't deal with armor, you know they're probably going to drop list A if they're expecting your armor list. It creates a little bit more list chicken. So the pairing process, the selection of your casters is going to become significantly more complicated. List design is going to become significantly more complicated because everything is more static on the way in. Everything has to be fully thought out before you approach the table because you don't have that flexibility at the table. This doesn't necessarily mean that skews are back. We'll have to see how they incorporate changes into the game. I think they know that flexibility from the spell rack has been helpful towards lists and not being gotcha'd or stuck in a list chicken. We'll have to see where and how tools show up for lists to maybe add some diversification. But obviously, Mark II was a fantastic game. Warmachine thrived and it had this set list. So again, not really that worried about it. One other thing I am particularly interested in is it's not just defense skews and armor skews, but also the range versus melee game. Right now, I find the range versus melee game to be pretty well balanced. There's a lot of very powerful guns out there. Almost every single army on their spell rack has some sort of anti-shooting spell. Deflection or deceleration, you have an answer. Now, again, like the defense and armor items, where do you find those answers from? Chimera obviously has a -3 range bubble. Storm Legion has a -3 range bubble. There are some fixes there. And so you have to wonder if other factions get little tools like that that help protect them from the range game, or if we see other changes. The point is that I would love to see the balance of the ranged and melee game maintained where it's at, and changing the spell rack is going to present SFG with a challenge there, that I'm certain they're working through. The other question on not having a spell rack, I wonder, is the tempo of the game. A spell rack gives you the option to have an answer for everything generally. And so it does make the game very killy. If I need mat fix, I put the mat fix. If I need an armor fix, I get an armor fix. And so I can go into a game with all the answers that I need. And so games play a little bit quicker. If I don't have all the answers, I have to figure it out. Again, it depends on how SFG allocates resources to each of the armies in the January update, but it is something I want to keep an eye on. Is the game going to slow down because I don't have all the answers presented on my spell rack? The second major item that they mentioned in the keynote is that they are going to lower the lethality overall of the game. Again, something I think very interesting. They generally talked about maybe some units are going to lose a mat or a rat, or rather than having generically good stat line 7/7/6/6, you'll see a unit that specializes in one or the other. So you're going to see a lot more 6/5s or 5/6s. Again, this is a question of tempo. If we don't have the versatility of the spell rack to answer all the questions and units are less effective, how does that play out in the game tempo? Obviously SFG has play tested this, and so they know the feel of the tempo that they're going for, and it might be slower than what we're doing right now, and I think that's okay. While I say that I think the current tempo of the game is fine, I do understand where it can be fast. Having games that could be a little bit grindier, less alpha strikes, it could be a good thing. I'm really curious to see how it evolves and it comes out in January. I think they definitely have a lot of room to play with here, and I trust that in playtesting that they've been able to figure out the right balance. But it will be kind of nice that you get to protect your toys a little bit more. And so I wonder if cagier play will be further rewarded. I wonder if things like sprint and reposition will gain additional value because things are not as killy. Having that significant movement advantage becomes a much more superior way to play the game, right? If I can't hit harder and if I can't hit more accurately, I can win the game through movement. And so I'm also curious to see how that paradigm shifts. I do think that movement is going to become more and more key post-January. Getting away from the rules changes in the game, another wonderful thing in the keynote was a reveal of new models. I would say the biggest part of it was the addition of bringing back the Apotheosis heavy warjacks now as 80mm super heavies. They had each of the models there presented. They did have 2 for sale, and I can tell you in person, all of them are absolutely gorgeous. I love each of the models, incredibly flavorful. They're going to be wonderful centerpiece models. They look super cool, and I think they're going to be powerful pieces. So I'm really excited to get these on the table, to see these on the table. I think the nostalgia of having these warjacks back is significant. It's going to mean a lot to older players, and it's going to bring life to newer players. I think bringing these guys back is an absolute home run. What I think is really exciting is they're all being released over the next 3 or 4 months. Deathjack and Azdarak were available on site. I think Thunderhead comes out in January with Behemoth not far behind. So we're going to get these in our hands. We're going to get the January update, and we're going to have 3 of the 4 of these things on the table straight away as everybody ramps up again. The other big discussion was the Kithgard. Again, they had a lot of Kithgard models on site, nothing for sale. It's an absolute beautiful range. The attention to detail on all of these guys is incredible. They're a painter's dream. They're trolls, right? They're wild and silly and just absolutely incredible. Love trolls, never been a troll player, but love the look. They're absolutely gorgeous. There was a Brine Blood Marauders player with a beautifully painted army. James Russell won Best Painted with his Marauders, and so he was able to demonstrate just how much life you could bring to the current set. And the Kithgard are going to be the same way. There's going to be so much to pull out in here in details. The last item I really want to talk about is Old Umbria is getting their Colossal, and it's being revealed on Wednesday. So I'll have a video Thursday morning talking about that card afterwards. As far as wrapping up Lock and Load, I will have a video here soon reviewing the 2 80mm that are currently printed that we have rules for. That'll be the Necrofactorum and the Sea Raiders Super Heavies. And then because of busy week of releases from Lock and Load, I am going to do a meta Monday to review the meta at Lock and Load as the sort of final meta of the season. But I'm going to release that video next Monday while we just review the content that we have in hands. Everyone, thanks for watching. This is still Spell Rack. Please like and subscribe. Talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.